بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome back everyone to our reading of this great text of our Tariq Qawaid al-Tasawwuf, the principles of Sufism by Sidi Ahmad Zarruq rahimahullah. We will be concluding inshallah this section, section 5, with the next few principles. So we begin with principle 73. It's on the bottom of page 55. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. Sidi Ahmad Zarruq, he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. Principle 73. The usuli, she translates it as the traditionalist, but that's not what he means. The usuli is the person who engages in usul al-din and usul al-fiqh, theology and jurisprudence. The usuli is concerned with embellishing faith with certainty. So right away he's talking about usul al-din, theology. So the person, the theologian, the person who studies aqidah, theology, al-tawheed, all names for the same subject. The usuli or the theologian is concerned with embellishing faith with certainty and realizing certainties to such a degree that he is ready for the direct vision of the truth, and even disavows his own realization. Right? So the job of the theologian is to arrive at a degree of certainty in regards to the things that we believe in, particularly the things that we believe in regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Disavows his own realization because the theologian is confined with that subject, with the subject of theology and the principles of how you arrive at evidence and how you argue the truth vis-a-vis theological beliefs. So it's still like a cerebral activity. Whereas in tasawwuf we're talking about, I realize this, I see it, I feel it, I am that which I believe. Reality has such power over him, the theologian, that he is bold and aggressive in regard to whatever he carries out in the way of esoteric teachings without any hesitation at all. Because of that, his mind expands from the beginning of the path to the end, and he reaches the goal in the shortest period of time. For whosoever goes towards Allah Ta'ala because of his innate disposition will reach him to the degree he detaches himself from his disposition. Okay, the important part of this paragraph is this last line. Whoever goes towards Allah because of his innate disposition will reach him to the degree he attaches himself from his disposition. Meaning that the only way you arrive at the goal in the tariq is by being yourself. If you try to be somebody else, if you try to be like somebody else, you're still not really, you're not going to get there, or you might get there, but it'll take you a long time because you're not you. You're not who you are. So everybody, even though we're in one tariq, everyone has an individual path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the hardest thing in the path is this lesson, is just learning that, I'm just going to be the way I am. And in the equipment that Allah Ta'ala gave me, inshallah, I'm going to arrive at my goal. It's very common that, people will want to be like the shaykh. Act like the shaykh, talk like the shaykh, dress like the shaykh, imitate the shaykh, which is normal because that's the power of the relationship. And that's exactly what the Sahaba did with the Prophet ﷺ. They followed him intensely. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about sort of what's inside you. That you have to arrive at the way that is your way. And arrive at that realization the way that is your way of arriving at that realization. Ibn Ata'illah has said in his Taj al-Urus, do not use invocations except those which the powers of your soul will help you to love. So, another problem is that people are like, oh, I want to, I heard about this wird, or I heard about this hizb, or I heard about this wazifa, and it's almost like there's like a nafs, there's like a self thing in it. this hizb, whatever, might be like a great hizb, but it might not be your hizb. It might not work for you the way it works for somebody else. Other than, of course, the basic daily readings and, of course, the invocation of the divine name, which is standard. We're talking about the extra things. So sometimes there is a specific dua or wird, or hizb, wazifa, that people sort of they migrate towards. Then that's good, and that's for you. Sidi Abu Hassan al-Shadhili radiallahu anhu said, the Shaykh is the one who leads you to repose, not the one who leads you to weariness. Meaning that the Shaykh is supposed to make things easy for you and help you, not the one that just overtaxes you. So when you find somebody that's guiding you, and every time you turn to them, they're solving the situation, they're making you feel comfortable, they're making you feel it's easy, it's within reach, so on and so forth. That's the sign of true guidance, of the true Shaykh. But if every time you talk to the Shaykh, you always feel you're in the negative, you always feel you're deficient, you always feel down, so on and so forth, then there's something wrong in that relationship. Then maybe that person is not your Shaykh. When Sidi Abu Hassan asked Shaykh Abu Muhammad Abdul Salam ibn Mashish, radiallahu anhu, ibn Mashish was his Shaykh, about the Prophet saying, sallallahu, facilitate matters, do not make them difficult. He said that it means guide them to Allah, not to something else. For he who guides you to the world deceives you. He who guides you to do work tires you. And he who guides you to Allah advises you. The details of this path are described in the books of Ibn Ata'illah and those who follow his teaching. So this is a very common statement, but sometimes it's actually attributed to Sidi Abu Hassan himself. Man arshadaka ila dunya faqad khadalak. Whoever advises you of matters of this world has deceived you. وَمَنْ أَرْشَدَكَ إِلَى الْعَمَلِ فَقَدْ أَتْعَبَكَ. And whoever advises you towards doing more work has just made you tired. وَمَنْ أَرْشَدَكَ إِلَى اللَّهِ فَقَدْ نَصَحَكَ. And the person who advises you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has truly advised you. Okay. Principle 74. The multiplicity of subdivisions in a fundamental principle decrees that there be a multiplicity of subdivisions in the practical applications. So usually when we talk about first principles, we have like an overarching kind of like one sentence first principle. That principle can be subdivided, so there are divisions to the principle, because the principle is a very condensed statement and it's very it's like very high level. So sometimes you need a couple of subdivisions to understand like what exactly that means. And then furthermore, when you have the principles established, now we want to see all of its manifestations, what we call the branches, al-furu'a. So the asl and the fara, the principle and its branches. This principle, because it's a first principle, it will permeate many different branches. So in fiqh, it's easier to see this. For example, we have a principle, al-yaqinu la yazulu bil-shak. Certainty is not violated by doubt. Okay, so that's a principle. Where do we find this principle in Islamic law? You find it here, here, here. You find it in hundreds of points of Islamic law. So that one principle permeates. In this example, it's just there's no subdivision of the principle. But when you have first principles of metaphysics, of the esoteric sciences, or of the science of reality, then there can be subdivisions to the first principle itself. Okay, the initiates or the murids of each path do not refer to a single principle of their path, but to a number of principles, except the Shadhilis. For their path is founded on one principle, namely the abandonment of self-determination face to face with Allah as regards whatever He determines in the way of decrees and commandments. Meaning you give up yourself for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah is in charge, Allah chooses, and we listen and we obey. At-tadbir, in the Arabic he uses the word at-tadbir. And this is one of the titles of one of the books of Ibn Ata'illah, Isqatu at-tadbir, At-tanwir fi Isqatu at-tadbir, the illumination in giving up, planning and devising. And all of Ibn Ata'illah's books have been translated into English, and you can find, I think we have a book list on our website the Shadhili, that has the translations, and of course I've translated as well the Hikam of Ibn Ata'illah. But At-Tanwir fi Isqat al-Tadbir is one of the books of Ibn Ata'illah as-Sakandari. So this is the primary principle of our tariq. It doesn't mean that the other principles don't apply. But what he's trying to say is if you keep going up, 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 up in the pyramid of principles, this is at the very top for us, is kun haythuma aqamak Allah. Be where Allah Ta'ala has placed you. That's our way. He determines in the way of decrees and commandments. The practical applications, furu'a, how do we then apply this principle in our tariq? It is the practical applications of their way are based on following the sunnah, contemplating Allah Ta'ala's grace, and submitting to the divine rules while understanding the wisdom behind them. So we do that by following the best example we have, which is the example of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And then of course, in following that, how does that impact our belief and our understanding of Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala? These are the fine points of various paths, and their followers have revolved around them, but they have not been able to express them as clearly as the Shadhilis. In the Tanwir, the book that I just mentioned, Ibn Ata'illah radiallahu anhu explains more clearly and briefly what is to be found in the lengthy works or summaries of the Sufis. So the Shadhilis, we are a later tariq. Sidi Abu al-Hasan is around the 7th century. So there was, several centuries of tasawwuf before us, including several great books of tasawwuf before us, like the Risala of Imam al-Qushayri, Qut al-Qulub by al-Makki, Ihya al-Ulumuddin by al-Ghazali, which I think he'll mention I think in the next principle he mentions. So for us, one of the brilliant things of Sidi Abu al-Hasan is but he reduced all of that it's like tasawwuf 2.0. Well, let me reduce everything that came behind me in that one thing, which is just give up planning and throw yourself in the worship of Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala, and you do that by following the sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It doesn't mean that he's not saying that our tariqah is better than other tariqahs. He's just sort of identifying for us what is a distinctive characteristic. The path that is to be followed is the path of unity, which no one can either reject or defame, which leaves no praiseworthy quality behind without securing it for the seeker, nor any blameworthy quality without ridding him of it through purification. It is indeed as he has said, Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him. Okay, and then the last principle in this section, principle 75. Subdividing a general discourse into principles and applications is of benefit to whosoever has a fundamental principle to which he can refer, although it is confusing to someone else. Reflecting on such general works as Qut al-Qulub, Abu Tayyib al-Makki, and the Ihya Ulumuddin by Abu Hamid al-Ghazali and the like is useful for anyone who has a path which he follows with knowledge or action or a spiritual state, for he can see where he stands. This is all the more the case given that these works are especially concerned with consoling the soul with its obscure problems and whatever its state is, while closely examining the mishaps of its deals with Allah, or referring to the aspects of the close relationship with Allah Ta'ala, or verifying whatever occurs in the path and explaining what is beneficial and what is the most beneficial. So, while Sidi Ahmad Zarruq radiallahu anhu is telling us about our principled approach, and our tariq is very much a first principles approach to tasawwuf, the whole book is called Qawa'id al-Tasawwuf, or the rules or the principles of tasawwuf. Sometimes it can be confusing because to think in a first principle way, sometimes it takes a little bit of mental practice to be able to link the principle to the branch and to be able to think in a first principled way. It's not something necessary that's intuitive, although I wish it were, because first principle thinking is really the only way to think. It's the cleanest way to think. But anyway, so rest assured we have these other books, we have these other manuals that help guide us in the minutia of our day-to-day tariqah life. Although these works in themselves are not a path for the aspirant or the man of knowledge, they are useful from the point of view of realization and verification. The first is manifested in the Qut al-Qulub more than in the Ahya, while the second is more manifest in the Ahya. It is for this reason that Sidi Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili radiallahu anhu said, the work of Qut al-Qulub bequeaths light onto you, while the work of the Ahya or Ahya al-Din bequeaths knowledge onto you. Any work that follows the aforementioned books is to be viewed in the same light on Allahu A'lam. Okay, so basically, in the studying of the books of tasawwuf that are beyond our books, when Qut al-Qulub and Ahya al-Din are some of the greatest books written in tasawwuf, and actually the Ahya al-Ghazali takes frequently a lot from the Qut al-Qulub. If you have a critical edition of the Ahya, you'll see in the footnotes, it's hundreds and hundreds of footnotes that the origin of these statements goes back to Qut al-Qulub. The Ahya is a very cerebral journey. It's a very long book. It's 40 individual books. Usually it's printed in 4 large volumes, but there are 40 individual books, and he doesn't leave anything that's basically undiscussed. And in the theology section of the book, you think like you're reading a book of theology. In the fiqh section of the book, you feel like you're reading a work of fiqh or usul al-fiqh, and many times there are many fiqh discussions in the Ahya that you might not necessarily find in the other books of the Shafi'i madhab, because al-Ghazali was a Shafi'i, and so on and so forth. And he kind of takes you on this steady path all the way through your journey from everything you need to know, and it's a very cerebral book. So that's why he says, Sidi Abu al-Hasan radiallahu anhu says, it gives you knowledge. Whereas Al-Qut al-Qulub, it's a book that kind of illuminates for you what's missing from your life. For us, all of that is embedded in the dhikr that we commit to. The daily readings, the invocation of the divine names at night, the instruction of the Shaykh, the ahzab, all of the awrad and the ahzab of Sidi Abu al-Hasan and his students, the ahzab attributed to Al-Mursi Abu al-Abbas and Ibn Ata'illah, like his munajah, that's usually at the end of the hikam, Abu Muwahib al-Shadhili, we have a whole volume that was put together by an Indian scholar, Al-Kashmekhanawi, rahimahullah, which is a whole basically encyclopedia of all of the adhkar that's attributed to the Shadhili tariqah. And he has a volume for the Naqshbandiyya and a volume for those attributed to Shaykh al-Akbar Muhyiddin ibn Arabi radiallahu anhu. So he kind of published these 3 major volumes, but particularly the volume of the Shadhiliyya is something that is kind of circulates around the Shadhili tariqah, and all of the things that are in the cerebral books are injected in these adhkar for us. So one of the things he's kind of saying, but I don't want you to take this as a rule. You don't necessarily need to read those books, because if you do the adhkar and you do the work, you will get to where you're needing to go. That being the case, I advise that you read these books, because sometimes if you don't have a frame of reference in your mind in which to plug the things in, sometimes you get like a jewel and it comes to you, but you don't know where to place it, so you lose it. It's like if I give you something precious, like a valuable book that's old, or I give you an exotic fruit, or you need to take it home and refrigerate it or freeze it. You got to do something to it, or else it will spoil. It's sort of like the same thing. That's how I look at it. And I'm sorry to sound sacrilegious with these examples, but I'm just fishing for the right example. But sometimes when you do the dhikr and you get like this positive wedded, you get a piece of inspiration. If you don't have like the right box to put it inside you, sometimes you can lose it. So for me, I advise the reading, and that's why we put together the reading list on the website, so that you can have the proper framework. I just recently read the Ahya from cover to cover. I finished, I can't remember when I finished, but it was like within this last year, last 12 months or something. And it's one of those books where I'm very familiar with the book because I grew up always going to the book and always reading in the book. But I was like, I want to just read it cover to cover. And it's like the gift that keeps giving. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful book. And specifically the Ahya, the reason I mentioned the Ahya is that almost all of the 40 books, individual books of the Ahya, if not all of them, have been translated in very, very capable translations. So I really recommend that people make the effort to acquire that. A lot of them are translated by Fons Vitae, or published often by Fons Vitae and Islamic Text Society. Between those two, you should be able to find 38, let's say, of the 40. Maybe there's like two more that are still being translated. But it's a very, very important resource for us. More specifically are the books of Ibn Ata'illah, which, as I said, they are all translated. And, Abu Hassan al-Shadhili, his Khalifa was al-Mursi Abu al-Abbas in our silsila, and after al-Mursi Abu al-Abbas was Ibn Ata'illah. So Ibn Ata'illah, radiallahu anhu, has done one of the greatest services to the tariqah because he has put in writing these beautiful expressions of the things that, as you can see, this is not an easy text to read. I just really wanted to read it myself, so that's why I decided we're going to, do these sessions on the. It's not an easy text to read. Maybe it would have made more sense that we started with a book by Ibn Ata'illah, but we'll get to it, inshallah. But in addition to the Ahya, you definitely want to get the individual books of Ibn Ata'illah, which are not that many. And as I said, they will give you a great understanding of exactly what he's saying in this section 5 that we just read, particularly the last few principles. Okay, we'll put a pin in it here. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim tasliman kathira.